Hello, I'm Angie Dowdell. I am a teacher with Educators Now as a substitute paraprofessional advocate of STEM education and a former data scientist and data analyst. I'm not actively working as a fintech data scientist and data analyst at this time. And instead, I branched into working for a larger tech company this year as a support personnel for data labeling and a data analyst role. So, data analyst role. With that being said, I have seen some very interesting things happen over the past 5 years across educational and tech support industries, and they do fuse. They have a large amount of commonality despite common um, thoughts about the two diverging. With that being said, that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is to bring out something that I've observed as a emerging teacher and an experienced paraprofessional and substitute teacher. And that is that um, unfortunately, we can always hold our students accountable to a certain level of expectations when they're labeled as being neurodivergent, ESE, or special needs in any way. Um, Oftentimes, kids who do throw tantrums in class and have angry outbursts towards their classmates, such as throwing objects that could hurt someone else and storming out of class and things like that, will not be allowed to come in and apologize. As a matter of fact, administration, I experienced something to where on Monday, I was teaching in a class, a student stormed out, and she was a cute little student, very cute, adorable. And when I walked in, saw this adorable 2 year old throwing a pencil and having a spat with another student. I thought, okay, they'll just apologize to each other. I always bring them up, they'll apologize to each other and keep it moving, right? And I was being shuffled from place to place in the school because they had a teacher shortage and they have rotations and they didn't explain anything to me. One teacher would come up during one block and explain one note, and then another would come up and explain another note, and that's kind of how I navigated the school that day. Is note by note from teacher to teacher. Coming in, I didn't receive instructions on specific students, their learning needs, their neurodivergence, and etc. Most of the time, I can kind of pick it up what different students may need and what their different strengths and weaknesses are, and I can pretty much assess it pretty quickly. But in this case, I was being shuffled within a 30 to 45-minute interval from classroom to classroom. I get to the second class, and the class was pretty okay as long as I controlled the noise level with the lights. That issue was reported to an admin. She walked in and saw the lights, and she was like um, very surprised that I was using the lights. And as a sub, they have different rules, such as the students can't have the computers out while there's a sub there. And because I had been at that school several times and I had never received those instructions ever, I didn't even know that. And so I we had simultaneous issues going on. So one, the computer issue; two, the lighting, using lights. And by the way, we had a science lessons about lights. And then the another issue going on was that a student was having an angry outburst and throwing things, having a tantrum, kicking a trash can down, and storming out of class and sitting against a wall outside. And a student who saw her do this outburst after seeing her name written on the board for needing to improve her behavior, she a student said she always does that, as if this is something that she does every day. So a teacher brought her back in the classroom, and I said, "Excuse me, but she cannot come back in here without apologizing to her classmates." And the girl was like, just looking at me. She didn't even communicate at all. She didn't say one single word to me. And then I said, "Excuse me, what's your name?" And then she may have told me her name and may not have. I don't remember, but it was basic, barely any communication. She probably said one or two words to me the whole time. Oh, yes. I remember what she said at the end after I asked her what her name is. She began to communicate more with her words and less with her eyes and her body language. And she said, "Oh, I need to take this student to another room first before she can take accountability." Parenthetically, I'm speaking, to de-escalate her on paper first. And I said, okay. And then she walked out. She came back with an admin. And later on, I was asked to leave for the day right in front of the students. And I left without that student being held accountable with something as simple as her name being written on the board for needs improvement. And number two, just apologizing to her classmates, one who she threw a pencil at, etc., the kicking of the trash can, everything. So that's a problem. And I know we have this whole notion of that we correct privately, but as teachers, for me, I'm more old school, and I do believe in open admonishment versus hidden love, as the book of Proverbs talks about. So I try to go by the Bible and not like any common things that we do nowadays, because that works for me, and I find it to be the wise thing to do. But I would say that it made me very disappointed with education in general right now. It made me disappointed with how the admin responded, and I was very upset. And I had never been put out at a school in the middle of teaching like that. And I have to say, I'm very kind of disappointed in how our schools treat our subs. Is as if subs. I don't know how they are treating the teachers, but it's as if they don't get an authority in behavior management, but have to manage the behaviors. And I have a really good track record at most of the schools at seeing an improvement in the student learning outcomes and their behavior over time. And most of it's based on accountability and presentation practice production, a simple pedagogy, um, foundation that I learned as a TEFL instructor. And for me, and years of tutoring and teaching and instructing, and so I do believe that it's put me in a place of being contemplative about my future as a teacher. Even though I've enjoyed most of the schools, but there was no accountability from the admin. No one said a word. They said, we can't tell you why we're putting you out of the school. That we will let you call your agency and ask them. And I called him, and he texted me saying they weren't upset when explaining the situation, and later he said they appreciated my seriousness and my passion, but they felt that because I had a conflict with someone named Adams, that they would have to put me off the campus. By the way, I never saw a conflict. All I saw was someone roll their eyes and walk out the room, literally. The person never came to me directly and had me put out of school based upon a distorted version of what actually happened in the class. And at first, as a teacher, I take it very seriously. What's going on? I'm wondering, like, what is happening? And I was in tears and I was inconsolable for a couple days. And started to research some of this, and I realized this is becoming a common issue, not just here where I am, but ubiquitously, that people are seeing a difference in the way they can educate students. And it's making me count the cost before I even go into the field. I'm really considering just going back into fintech and banking. But in that field, I made a lot of money, but I didn't feel like I was making an impact every day. And I started to become unfulfilled. And I'm talking about, having to work behind a computer screen 9 to 5 for years on end just took a toll on my sense of self. And I personally couldn't do it anymore. And I had so much more left to give. And when I go to these schools, most of the time, the students really need it. They're really desperate for it, even if they don't say it. It's just someone to care and to pour into them, and to care about not just their behavior, but their learning outcomes, both synergistically together. And to be understood, especially for the ones who are dealing with home situations and abuse and um, quote unquote cognitive issues and neurodivergence and quote unquote special needs and things like that, which there are physical and cognitive versions of those. But so far this year, I've seen that the cognitive ones are becoming the more predominant um, focus. And finally, I will say this. I'm going to come back to what I was told by a student one time who was tested to have be identified as having autism. And I'm going to tell you what this student told me before, because it was astonishing to me that this student knew their diagnosis and how they could leverage it to get out of doing work. Um, and while me, myself, I am neurodivergent as well, very neurodivergent, and have been tested and I've been in and out of different modalities of addressing these issues, both as a child and as an adult. I was in special education for 2 years during my K through 5 years, and I graduated valedictorian by the time I got to high school. Have faced a plethora of challenges in life because of my neurodivergence, and um, it's caused me a lot of personal and professional challenges. And I know how challenging the students have it who are neurodivergent. But one thing I always advocate for is overcoming learned helplessness. And when I cannot advocate for that, I can no longer do my job as a teacher. And I personally am doing what our Messiah told us to do, which is to count the cost before you build a house. And I'm counting whether or not I want to participate in something that will not nourish our children and our upcoming generation that's going to carry us. I don't know if I want to participate in this. We will be determining that, but this week was very discouraging and showed me just just how far we are in this particular era of education. So thank you for listening to me. I don't know who this is going to actually matter to, but I'm really appreciative to kind of get this video out. And I hope that you have a better experience than I if you are in education. If you're not, and you're just a parent or an adult or someone who's part of the village for a child, I pray that you will take this into consideration. And the key word that I would say that matters the most to me as an educator is accountability. I think it's important for both children and adults to have a high level of accountability that they practice on a frequent basis. Thank you.